don't use AI. We have some machine learning in our software, but I find so far that in the clientele that we deal with in that range of sales, for the most part, the pure AI predictive pricing where, we tell, sales forces don't respond well when I say, your price ought to be X or Y. The sales force, and I manage salespeople and distributors, they don't like hearing from the fact or the company headquarters. They are very independent. Even direct sales, they don't want to be told that they have discount authority. They want to be able to do their business. And at Emerson, the sales channel was completely independent of the factory, the division. So they had all these big divisions, hundreds of millions of dollar divisions with all their people, but they did not have direct control of the sales force. But as far as forecasting is concerned, they call or predictive or prescriptive analytics, tell me what I should do. That's out there. It hasn't really got serious into the pricing realm, although the big companies like Zilliant and PriceFX and Vendavo, these are the big pricing software companies, they've included a lot of that. But in the marketplace that I deal with, what they really need is someone like myself and the people I deal with.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Priceless Conversations, the podcast where we navigate the art and science of pricing, product management, automation, and AI. I am a scientist who found her way into product management, and I'm learning about pricing today.
Thanks, Satya. It's my favorite place where we explore the art and science of product management, pricing, and authentic stories. We are your guide through the weird, wonderful, and wildly frustrating world of product and pricing. Our guest today is Dick Sobel, founder and MD of Price Point Partners, a veteran of pricing who has helped Strike Tool, Haemonetics Corporation, Denora, and multiple others with their pricing strategy. He is also a creator of Equity Analytics and has presented at numerous pricing conferences and written amazing papers around pricing, especially B2B pricing. So guys, welcome to Dick Sobel of Price Point Partners.
Yeah, it's point and click, but it is a SaaS business, meaning that customers pay after we do a setup. They'll pay a subscription fee on a monthly basis. We update the data, and they have 24/7 access to their information, their own portal, and I provide professional services during the time they are subscribing.
Wow.
And so that provides continuous income. But for me, it's sort of like razor and blades. The assessment part is great, and any kind of services, professional services and discussing strategy and so forth is fine. But the objective, if I can, is to get a customer all the time, meaning you don't just have one time, a month or two, and you're gone. You want to be able to have an ongoing relationship. And some of our clients have been with us for 5 or 6 years. And so that's a nice relationship. So we have strategic partners, Amit.
Wow.
So that, yes, we have one of the leading SaaS software consultants, actually in the country, and a thought leader, Stephen Forth of Hibica, and they're in British Columbia. And he's a big driver in AI, SaaS, and he has his own software. We've done business together, joint business. We have a strategic partner in distribution, a gentleman who was vice president of Graybar, a big distributor in the U.S., and we've worked together. We have a company called Boost Pricing. She actually goes around doing value-based selling training to big companies and to institutions, and she does keynotes. And we've worked together. And finally, one a market research company in Pittsburgh that does pricing research. They do market research. So what I'll do as a team is I leverage all of these people. And of course, perceptive analytics for uh, serious data work. If people want to do something, you put that all together, then I can compete with in the $10 to $200 million market area in terms of annual sales. We've had account as large as 400 million, and so now with not only is it price, but we do a lot of cost work within the program. Now with the tariffs issue in place, for example, we can provide people real time the prior annual average cost, the current costs. You can do it month to month. And then if you know for each product, right, for each product SKU, if you know what percentage of the material cost is subject to tariff, and then what percent tariff you're being applied, and you set that up so they can see their actuals versus what the potential tariff impact would be. And frankly, so for example, if somebody has a $1,000 product and their cost is $500, right? But only 25% of that cost is subject to tariff, and the tariff is only 10%, there's only about a 2% impact on the overall cost. So you have to do that before people panic. You have to kind of look at each product individually, and then you can make some price adjustment. And so we do, as I say, I've always told CFOs, the first thing we want to be able to do, and you would understand this as well, Amit, is how do you financially account for your business? Just what are you doing? What goes to your P&L? And what we like to say is, if we're going to work together, we like to be able to find a place on your P&L where you can measure each month the impact of price, cost, mix, volume, discount analysis, price elasticity, all those things, how they play into your business. And but to be honest with you, there are many clients don't have the internal staff to really get into what we call the weeds, the detail, and people who are involved with data, right? The answers are in when you really deep dive. And a lot of times, clients are just interested is what is my price realization, right? And how many dollars and what's going on. But as consultants, we want to lead them to a path, right, where they can make mid-course corrections on a monthly basis. And when they make price increases, like when they say, we're going to raise price, when you look at elasticity in B2B, there's a lot of debate about that, right? Is it really realistic? But here's the thing. If you do a profile, let's say even by a product group, there might be 100 different SKUs within a product group, and half of them actually did well, meaning that when they raised price, they actually got increased volume. And the other half, when you raise price more traditionally, they had decreased volume. But the message is, even putting a price increase across a product group, a uniform price increase, right, may not do you any good because you may have more of the negatives than the positives, and you wind up getting no price realization at all. So we try to get into these kinds of things, and we try to, we look to try to get 1 to 3-4% price improvement, which is actually margin improvement, if clients are willing to make the effort. And so that's kind of what we do in a general nutshell, Amit. I know that was a long-winded answer to your question, but I hope that was helpful.
Dick, I do have a question here. So you said the raise of pricing, and to understand a bit better for myself, you have um, pushed back on blanket price increases.
Right. Yes.
Why don't they work? Like, what should
Yeah.
we consider instead when we are doing the such
Right.
thing?
Yeah. The thing is, it depends, of course, what your pricing strategy is. If you're doing cost plus, if you're doing, value-based pricing, or you're looking at competitive prices, which I think is a bad way to go about it. Um, People like to do web scraping. The trouble with that is that those prices are never the prices people pay. Yeah, the prices that are on the internet, right? I mean,
Yes.
and so, but here's the thing: if you're doing cost plus pricing and you do a across the board pricing, some people are going to be leaving on the money on the table, and other people are they're going to be paying too much. You lose customers, and the elasticities of the business vary from product to product, from customer to customer, from SKU to SKU. Some customers, the more loyal customers are willing to pay more. The price sensitive customers are not going to take the increase. And so it's what we call strategic pricing. And I have some papers we've done on that, and you're welcome to request them. They're on my internet. Strategic pricing says that there's different levels of willingness to pay, right? And certain markets, you can do the value to them, like, say, pharmaceuticals in certain markets, and you've talked about this, Emmett, that uh, what they get out of it, right, is more for them than other markets that are more commoditized. And it's not just extra margin that they may make, but it might be reduced risk. It might be different kinds of things that are important to them with regards to price and cost and so forth. And so this helps. So when you're talking about price increases, you want to have a good history of how all your customers and markets, and you segment the markets and all that, how they performed in the previous time you raised prices, and how many times a year are you doing it, right? And then you want to measure that before you go and start raising prices again without having some science to back it up.
Mhm.
And although we don't use AI, we have some machine learning in our software. But I find so far that in the clientele that we deal with in that range of sales, for the most part, the pure AI predictive pricing, where we tell the sales forces don't respond well when I say your price ought to be X or Y, but we have displays, interactive displays that give them the whole view of a
Mhm.
particular product. We use standard deviations and customer size, and it's a very sophisticated scatter charts that are interactive. And you need to have that human element. You've got to pay attention to your business. So across the board, price increases across the whole portfolio, big no. Even among product groups, you need to segment and understand what you're doing, and that's how we do it.
Maybe a question that might be a bit controversial also.
Yes,
So, for the last few days and weeks, we have heard a lot about tariffs,
yes,
various governments. And you also once said tariffs are pricing signals. So, can you expand and also help me understand what does this word mean, and how our pricing
yeah,
become a signal to it? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So putting aside, the measurement we talked about before, um, economics is an area of interest of mine, and I'm not necessarily biased about it, but when you look at the world economies,
Mhm.
um, and the levels of tariffs that are put on, and years ago it was a protective thing, because particularly with new economies that are growing and that have not reached the sophistication, let's say, of the United States, right? Uh, we were very cooperative and we respected those tariffs because they were helping them develop and we developed relationships. But over time, things get out of balance like everything else. And in particular, I guess China is the primary issue. And by the way, I'm very, very happy that we have a good relationship with your prime minister and with India. And we hope, frankly, that a lot of that activity will move to your country because you are a democracy. And believe me, we in this country respect countries that have democratic leadership. And I don't know how you have elections. I did have a friend in India who ran for the election and they didn't win, but it was so many levels of voting. But um, but they're awesome. But so you get into a situation where now our president, I must tell you, is a very serious man, no matter what you hear about him. Uh, Although you can see he's backing off on things, he builds up a lot of leverage, he builds up a lot of pressure, so people will pay attention, and then he will sit down and negotiate, I believe, eventually fair deals for everybody. And I'm sure that your prime minister understands that, and give it a little time. And I think within the next month or two, I think it'll settle down. And I think India will benefit. It's because of your position in the world. And again, I don't know how you do it, but that's where that's why I think even Vietnam is still a communist country. And so we gave up a lot of blood in that war back in the 70s. But you can see what happens. Over time, there's healing. And I believe in that. So to your question, it's right now, there's confusion. But the fact is, each country has probably some tariffs that need to be adjusted, as well as we do. And I think if you're patient, this president will make it right. I believe he believes in fair trade, as I do. But the real issue is China. And I could tell you that, they're still going back and forth. But I think the Chinese economy is far weaker than they like to say it is. And I think that in the end, they have a lot more to lose than we do. And so, but I think India will be one of the big beneficiaries.
Thank you.
I don't know if that
For the
answers your
comment.
question.
For the tariffs part, like what constitute a tariff? Like what are the elements?
Oh yeah. So basically what it says is that anytime somebody ships something into the U.S. that has it's like a tax on that.
Yeah.
So either the country pays that tax or the shipper has to pay the tax. Okay. And so now that, for example, Apple was going to be part of that, and that would have meant that because Apple builds all the iPhones in China, that and the cost that the piece of the Apple cost is big, so they would have had to pay that amount to our treasury when they shipped an Apple phone into the U.S. The steel companies that were dumping a lot of steel at low prices into the U.S. Now, to save, and we lost many steel plants. Now, to save the steel industry, when they ship steel into the U.S., they have to pay the tax to the Treasury and make the price now more comparable with the U.S. steel. They're still probably less expensive, but not to the extent that they just get all the business. We want some of the business. So that's what that is. And it's complicated because who collects it, how they collect it, when it gets collected, how often it gets collected, and it's going both ways. Do they counterbalance? Who knows? That's up to the governments to figure out.
Thank you.
So it's a tax.
Yeah. Moving over to
Yeah.
some of how pricing teams are constituted.
Yes.
We've often heard, and with your experience at Emerson, that pricing teams are sometimes siloed. How do you get the buy-in from product, sales, and finance teams to align, especially in bigger companies? We've heard about that amazing experience you had at Emerson when you were presenting to the chairman.
Right. Yeah. It- you know, that's probably one of the toughest issues for pricing practitioners. And it's no longer just pricing, as I mentioned to you earlier. They touch all parts of the business.
Mm.
Uh, I'll give you an example of where it breaks down somewhat. I have a client on the West Coast, and they have a pricing council, and they get together. And originally we dealt with the CEO, and then the various C-level people. They come together and they talk about pricing. But as soon as you get off the phone, right, and they have a subscription, and as soon as you get off the phone, the people who should be using the subscription, they don't use it. They're not, they haven't bought in to the value to their company, even though different parts of the company believe it's valuable and they want to have it. And so it is always a selling job. I guess it's customer success is the term, Amit, to stay with these people, find ways to communicate, right? Because
Yes.
there's so many things on their table. Product managers, and I used to manage a whole bunch of product managers when I was in marketing, and they have all kinds of issues about product development, new products, and features, and going to shows and the whole thing. And so pricing comes up whenever it's time, to raise prices. It's not something they do ongoing all the time. Where I think product managers should have a lot of responsibility for margin, and many of them don't, because finance wants that and all this sort of thing. Now, with regard to the sales force, and I manage salespeople and distributors, they don't like hearing from the factory, or the company headquarters. They are very independent, even direct salespeople. They don't want to be told that they have discount authority. They want to be able to do their business. And at Emerson, the sales channel was completely independent of the factories, the divisions. So we had all these big divisions, hundreds of millions of dollar divisions with all their people, but they did not have direct control of the sales force. So the sales force had their own set of management, up to vice president of sales, right? Worldwide sales areas, Asia Pacific, Europe, right? India. We had a joint venture with India. So the point being that which is why I like this company I deal with, Boost Pricing, that they go out and they talk to people about how to sell value and why it's important. And then from the marketing perspective, your marketing material, your product material, everything you do needs to be focused on the value you're delivering to your customers. And as I said earlier, that value doesn't have to always be monetary. It can mean improved production. It can mean risk reduction, all sorts of things. And it's sort of like this. You go buy a bottle of water in the U.S. You can get a nice bottle of water for 70 cents in a convenience store. But if you go to a ball game, you pay $3 or $4 for a bottle, the value is very personal to people, and it's very personal even at the B2B. as to what of all your features, and you have not described what they might be able to do to help the client, right? Um, it might be something that you don't, as a vendor, you don't think's important, but it's very important to a client. And so that's what these people do. But there is this conflict. Everybody wants to kind of control it, but the more people that are involved, the less control there is. And nobody likes it when marketing tells finance, don't worry about it, our price ought to be this or that. And then they look at the numbers, and I help them with my tool. They see what the numbers are. They don't like it. So it is really a challenge for people in pricing practice to get buy-in, consistent buy-in from the stakeholders in the company. And even at a company like Emerson, the only time they're called to task is Emerson has monthly meetings with all the people, and they're always looking at the numbers, and they want to know about these things. But not every culture is that way. GE was like that, as you can imagine. All I can say is that it's an ongoing challenge, and where pricing is within a company it is a serious question, and it's not an easy answer. Yeah.
So, to add to the complexity or to ease the complexity, we now have AI entering the picture. So,
Yeah.
like you also mentioned about AI in our previous conversation. So, what is the role of AI in pricing now? Is it like every technology has two sides, right? One is forward looking, that you look forward to it, and the second are the drawbacks or the challenges that it comes with. So, how do you see AI's role in pricing, and in what bracket do you put it, forward looking or challenging?
I think the first area where, and I use AI in doing a lot of what we call the grunt work. So, for example, I use the ChatGPT, for example. It gives me Tableau calculations, Excel calculations, things that I can ask in English, and they come up with the calculation immediately. I never would have figured it out. It goes through the data, cleans up a lot of the data for you. And then the next question, and so in the Tableau, Salesforce now has introduced we had the machine learning. They've introduced something called Pulse, which is the next step. And now they have agents, AI agents. But they haven't quite released it yet. But again, because I look at what I do and I say, well, how could AI, how will that help me? Because they're reluctant to allow me to demo it in existing product in dashboards. But it would be nice. We can already ask questions of the data. And so if I click on a data point or a graph point, and it'll give me a selection of different areas like customers or products or whatever, and it'll tell you what was the information that built up that data point. So, for example, if I have a price realization of $20,000, and if I click on that point, it's going to tell you these are the 2 or 3 product lines that contributed and how much. These are the customers that contributed. These are the products that contributed. But as far as forecasting is concerned, they call or predictive or prescriptive analytics. Tell me what I should do. That's out there. It hasn't really got serious into the pricing realm, although the big companies like Gazillion and PriceFX and Vendavo, these are the big pricing software companies. They've included a lot of that. But in the marketplace that I deal with, What they really need is someone like myself and the people I deal with to help them with that. I'd rather not say, I predict that this price, your price ought to be X or Y. Here's the graphics you need to make that decision, and I will help you make that decision. As far as prescriptive, meaning what should I do? Yes, if people take the AI, your business, and then you add in market conditions and you add in what everybody else is doing, and if you can get a nice model that has all that, then I think it could be helpful. I think it's more helpful in B2C, where you're dealing directly with consumers. But eventually, what's going to happen is that Salesforce will allow me to get access to it in a more aggressive way, and I'll find ways to improve my business. But right now, none of my clients or prospective clients ever even ask me, well, are you using AI, in a pure form? But I know that's changing. And the fellow out on the West Coast, from Ibica, IBBAKA.com, you should take a look. He's introduced me to a lot of concepts that we're going to use, including, customer life, net dollar retentions, upsell, downsells, packaging, all these different things they use in SaaS, in software companies, can also be used with industrial manufacturing and distribution. So I think I wouldn't, if you're dealing with big companies, they're going to want all kinds of fancy things. They have the money for it. But if it depends on what markets you're addressing and what you're attempting to do. And as I say, we already incorporated in a small way in the program, but I use it a lot to answer a lot of questions, even about a customer's background and what they're doing and so forth.
Does this change how the pricing team now will look like this entire changes that we see? And do you see a difference between how the teams are being constituted today versus how it were 10 years ago?
Only in the bigger companies. When I say that, over $500 million, billion-dollar companies. In the smaller companies, they don't have pricing teams. As I said, you may have, what you find, you may have a pricing analyst. I mean, it's wide open, for people like yourself. They really, and if they do, that person is tasked with other analytic stuff, not just pricing. And it's not just pricing; it's pricing and margin. It's revenue growth management. It's not just pricing. And so, right, I mean, and so you just can't look at one aspect because it affects everything. But companies in general, the smaller companies, and when I say smaller, 10 to 200 million, may not sound small, but they don't have pricing teams.
Yeah.
So many questions, but I leave the next question to Amin.
Yes, Amit.
And thanks so much. And then, so moving on, and this is from your personal experience.
Yeah.
What is that one pricing decision that, you've talked about IBACA, you've talked about boost pricing. And what is that one pricing decision which you think was made by someone else that you wish you had made?
Well, an example of that company I talked about earlier, we went through analysis of what I felt made sense in going forward with price changes. And then they did their thing, and I felt they had opportunities to go anywhere from 2, 4, 5% in different product categories, and they wound up going 0 to 2%. So they ignored all the advice. And the problem with that, and they did more across the board stuff. And I said, no, you need to be more careful. And so I was very surprised and disappointed. But again, at the end of the day, I'm not an employee. I'm not here to dictate what they do. And they may have felt that, and again, they may have felt we're going to do what we want to do. We are a growing company. We know what we're doing. But thank you for your advice. We just chose not to use it. And sometimes that happens. The other thing is sometimes during the pandemic, we had clients when prices started going up because of supply chain issues. We had not the pandemic, during the inflation that we had in the U.S.
The 2019 period?
Yeah. Well, actually, the one that was 2023, we went up to 9% inflation and all this. Plus, there were supply chain issues. And we had clients in the infrastructure business that raised their prices 10, 20, 30%, and it stuck. They actually got it, and it surprised me. They were very, very aggressive. Yes. And then there was a situation, we had a client that a significant piece of their material was in rare earths, like iridium and ruthenium and other things of that nature. And those prices on the world market went up 3 or 4 times, as much as $4,000 or $5,000 an ounce, kind of thing. And they raised those prices along with them. Now, they managed to get those prices, but when the prices, and they made big price realization, but then the markets dropped rapidly, and they had some very bad, they lost a lot of business because they didn't drop their prices fast enough. And so, yeah. And so, and they don't like always to talk to their consultants about that. You would think, oh, let's talk about it. Yeah. But, people are
That's the right thing to do.
Yeah. It's the right. And by the way, when I get a subscription, I am available at any time throughout to have any kind of discussion. That doesn't have to be about price, or it could be about business conditions. Yeah, that's being answered to that question.
We've been, and that's what the benefit of having an experienced pricing consultants like you to be on the side. You is bringing the value specific to pricing, but towards multiple other aspects of a business, especially in B2B business, where there could be more than one lever that impacts the business. Could you talk a little bit, for our audience, what are the 3 pricing principles every B2B company should internalize?
Yeah. Well, clearly, the price is a key lever. People don't talk as much about material costs, but cost reductions and cost increases is overlooked. It shocks me because it's not as big as a lever as price, but it's very significant. I'm talking not labor and overhead, because those are costs that are allocated based on production. But it is your material cost that makes up for your product, and the bill of material that's associated with it, the way you get your materials, what your supply chain looks like, And whether you use standard costs, meaning you only update your costs once a year or every 6 months, which is not a good idea, or you're able to do actual costs, even on a transactional level. Not every company can, their enterprise system doesn't go to that level of detail that they need to be at. So, so the third one, also overlooked, that we measure at all levels,
Okay.
is mix, margin mix. Now, I have had clients, they raise their prices and they get price dollars, they get cost reduction, and they get cost dollars. And they had a prior period margin of, say, 45%. And then they look at the next quarter and it's 43% or 44%. And the CFO comes and says to marketing, what's going on here? What happened? And what happened, and I'll give you a specific example, but in general, the sales force sold more of the products that had higher margin than the total business. Oh, excuse me, had lower margin than the overall business. They sold more of that and less of the higher margin products, and Amit would understand that had higher margins in the overall business.
Yes.
And it is, and I'll give you an example how that happens. At Emerson, we had a big product business, but we also had a big system business. Now, product business had margins of 50, 60, 70%, particularly included spare parts. And system business, where you had a lot of engineering, a lot of cost, typically had 25% margin. System business sales were typically $1 million or more project. Product sales were $50,000. Yeah, about $50,000. So when salespeople got towards the end of the year or at the end of the quarter, and they're looking at their sales and their incentive plan does not reflect a margin piece, right? They go after the system business, and guess what? The overall margin of the business declines.
Yep.
And so
That's what happens.
That's what happens. So we measure mix at the customer level, the market level, the product level, at the SKU level, every possible level you can think of. We even measure salespeople's mix, how they're doing. Some salespeople, and you may see dramatic variances between salespeople. And so you have to look at price, you have to look at cost and mix, and then the volume, which is sales volume. And we bridge everything. We bridge all of that in our displays and so forth at every level of detail. And so there's no excuse not to understand what's happening to your business. And so you may have no problem with price, and you may have no problem with cost, but you have a big problem with mix. And that's why you need to have good salespeople get sales training, but they don't get value selling training, value price training, or to how not to give discounts, too many discounts, and how to negotiate. So those are the things to me that are very important.
Okay.
And by the way, sales, don't get me wrong, but you can't get sales right with heavy discounting, because you have to, as you know, if for every 5 or 10, depending on your margin of the business, a 10% discount might require a 20% increase in unit volume to maintain margin. And a lot of people don't understand that. You'd be surprised. I'm sure you know that, but I mean,
Yes.
salespeople don't understand it. So what I used to tell salespeople when I managed them, I said, look, you want a 10% discount? I want a 20% increase in volume from that. and they wouldn't talk to me again. I hope that answers the question.
That helps a lot. That helps.
Like you are saying so many truth bombs, in my opinion, for me. What is a pricing myth that's so common that even salespeople have them, like let alone product people or scientists like us, that you would like to debunk? Like, hey, this is not myth. This is something different, like a pricing myth or however you want to call it.
Yeah, could you rephrase that question about something regarding the salespeople?
So,
What you were asking? Yeah.
what's one pricing myth that even salespeople have that you would like to debunk? You said about discounts like 10.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, the pricing salespeople myth is that they're losing business on price, and they're not. Now, I will tell you, we have a client, a more recent client, who actually had an excellent one-loss report of every quote they've ever done, right? And all the products and customers. And what we did is we superimposed the losses on our dashboard that has all the wins, all the sales that they have, to demonstrate that you didn't lose that job on price because you have won jobs in the same market, similar customers at a higher price. And so salespeople don't want to say they lost the price because they never called on the customer and their competitors did, or that they they were not consulting type salespeople. They just were trying to get the order, and their competitors did. Maybe they had some. They never sold. They all they wanted to do is sell features and not value. But when you take the losses and you put it along all the wins, and it's for each product, for each customer, right? You find out that they didn't lose on price. So the biggest complaint is, I've got to get this price. And what'll happen is they'll go to the marketing person and they'll say, no, you got to have, you can't do this. Then they'll go to the marketing manager. Then they'll go to the vice president. And eventually, if they go to the CEO and he or she gives them the price, he or she destroys that whole process, because now they just drop the price to everybody. Because as soon as a salesman gets a good deal, everybody finds out. So that's what I would say. As I say, when you've been across all these different areas of the business and you've seen how people react, that's what happens. And so a pricing person, when they're talking to a pricing counsel within a company, talks about these things, and they laugh and they say, yeah, we know that. But it's like talking to a teenager. You tell them, if they ask you something, you give them some sage advice, they say, yeah, I know. And they go right ahead and do what they were going to do anyway. But that's part of this. That's part of this.
And it has been an absolute pleasure having you. I've learned a lot as a student in pricing. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and all the pricing stories. I must say that I have written so much notes that I want to go back to basics and again replenish my knowledge on pricing. But before we close, Dick, would you like to share how our listeners can reach out to you, on what platforms, or what's the...
Sure. Yeah, if they want to reach out to me, it would be pricepointpartners.com. One word. They can find me on LinkedIn. They'll find if they put my name into Google, they will find a number of podcasts I've done, like with impact pricing, March Stiving. I've done webinars with Zillion for them. I've done, I presented at the Professional Pricing Society. I've written a number of papers. That material, some of that material, I've done interviews, is on the web under Dick Sobel. There's only one Dick Sobel on the web anyway. I mean, there's a lot of, the name I use outside of business is Richard, but if you look up Richard, you won't find me there. So you'll find me there, and with various links to different places, and that's where you'll find me. So I appreciate that.
Looking forward.
Thank you so much, Dick.
No problem.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Stay curious, stay connected, and as always, keep building what matters.